Okay, so I've got my bowl. I've got my little pot of bright green matcha. It's not ready as soon as you add the water. You've got to go through this ritual of whisking, which I just think slows everything down. It's really nice. Yep, I mean, I get that sort of savoury, umami taste right from the beginning, and a little bit of bitterness, but also sweetness. But I mean, I think this would take a while for me to get used to having it as part of my daily routine. I'm Leyla Kazim, and today I'm jumping on board one of the biggest food trends of the last couple of years. It is a green wave that has been filling social media feeds and hitting cafe menus and supermarket shelves. I'm talking about matcha, a green tea in powdered form. In a pretty short time, matcha has become a phenomenon, morphing from prized ceremonial drink in Japan into a globally consumed lifestyle symbol. Videos tagged matcha have been viewed billions of times on TikTok.
So let's see what makes Kourtney Kardashian's matcha recipe so famous. Guys, look at the colour of this matcha.
It's the most beautiful summer day today, so let's go try this new matcha place that I've seen all over my TikTok.
Why is matcha everywhere? Is it just me, or is everything suddenly green? Coffee shops? Green. Bakeries? Green.
In Japanese, matcha literally translates to powdered tea, ma meaning ground or rubbed, and cha meaning tea. What makes matcha so unique is the shading of the tea plants before harvest, which gives it its famous umami flavour. Japan has been perfecting the production of matcha since the 12th century, developing it into an art form, and matcha has become deeply symbolic of Japanese identity and tradition. So few in Japan would have guessed what would happen next.
Tonight, matcha mania is sweeping the world, but demand for the Japanese green tea powder is drying up supplies. The market for matcha is expected to reach $5 billion by 2028. That's up 10% from just 2 years ago.
Now, the global trend for matcha is causing unprecedented demand, and it is pushing the industry in Japan to a tipping point and making headlines around the world. So today we're going to do a deep dive into the world of matcha and hear about how this supply shortage is causing profound changes in how this centuries-old tea is made and enjoyed. And with any trend comes the hype. So I'm also going to dig into some of the health claims which are making matcha so popular outside of Japan.
And the reason why we get more excited about matcha, you're not just kind of stewing your tea leaf and then just drinking the infusion, you're consuming the actual ground up powder of that leaf. And what that means in terms of the nutrition, you're then having higher levels of those compounds that are naturally present within that tea. And also, surprisingly, a little bit of fibre as well.
So the evolution of matcha is a fascinating story, and one that is developing as I speak. First to the streets of Bath. You've probably noticed this green wave popping up where you live. Perhaps a new matcha drink advertised in a coffee shop window, or maybe even a specialist matcha cafe has opened, like this one.
So we are at Matcha Thing in the corridor in Bath. So we only serve matcha-based drinks here.
Maren Fichter is a matcha barista and tea educator, and producer Sophie went along for us to be educated in the making of matcha.
So yes, I'm going to make a long matcha now. So this is just a matcha in water drink, so no milks, no other flavorings. This is the best way to experience matcha on its own. So first of all, I'll put the bowl on the scale and zero it, and then I'll add my matcha through the sieve. This makes sure that we remove any sort of clumping, because matcha is such a fine powder that it clumps up just kind of by static electricity. So now I'm adding the water to the matcha shot. So we use about 60 degrees water. It's not going to burn the matcha, it's not going to give you a very bitter flavor, it's going to emphasize the sweetness, but it's also warm enough that you can get a nice froth going. So the next step is to whisk the matcha. So for whisking, the key is to do it very quickly. It's a wrist motion rather than an arm motion, because your wrist can move faster than your arm. And what you're doing is essentially making a zigzag motion that will incorporate a lot of air into the liquid and powder mixture, and this will build that nice froth. Start with a little scoop of ice. And then we'll pour the matcha just straight on top and create that nice layered drink.
It's a gorgeous deep green colour, beautiful and foamy.
So our matcha has got a really lovely sort of balance of those green grassy vegetal notes with a lot of sweetness actually, and a little bit of astringency on the finish. Makes it really well-rounded, very balanced. It's got a lot of body actually.
So what do people tend to order here?
A lot of people are influenced by sort of what you see on social media in terms of matcha flavorings. So those tend to be our best sellers. But we do have quite a good sort of core set of customers who come in just for plain matcha, which is also quite nice to see.
I'll be chatting more to Maren later in the programme. Customers in Matcha Thing that morning were wide-ranging, from interested tourists, regulars and obsessed students like these two.
I'm Samara.
And I'm Laura.
How often do you drink matcha?
Laura's persuaded me to get one. So I think definitely it's now going to become an everyday routine of getting matcha.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
So what do you like about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, matcha is known to having like an earthy kind of taste to it, which I actually don't mind. But I think what I love is that you can mix different flavours with it, different syrups. So mine is definitely strawberry syrup with the matcha.
I sort of started drinking matcha because of the negative effects of coffee. I get really jittery. I drink it pretty much daily, which I don't know if it's bad. Like 2 a day is my limit, but like it's a much more like consistent energy like supply rather than sort of crashing after an hour after like having a coffee.
Yeah.
See, I call myself a matcha connoisseur, right? And I'm quite picky with it. When you go to like different cafes that are doing it and you see it coming out of a bottle, I'm like, oh, that's not real. That's not done properly.
Yeah,
I think it's become like a trend because it's like a cute green drink, but it has like a lot of properties and helpful like add-ons to it.
I think it's like the combination of like the health benefits along with how much you can customize it to match your preferences. It's like people like the color pink, so they would get like a strawberry matcha. If you like purple, you can get a lavender matcha.
There's a shortage of matcha at the moment. Have you heard about that?
No, I haven't heard of that. Oh, no way. I mean, I'm not really surprised. I mean, like, definitely with my uni friends, I think as well, it's become like everyone is suddenly just into matcha. It's like out of nowhere, it's become this like phenomenon, which I think is pretty cool. It is pretty good as it's kind of, I guess you could say, better for your health. Yeah. But yeah, no, I haven't heard of the shortage at all. But I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all.
To understand more about how matcha has spread across the world, I called Sally Gertine, all-round tea enthusiast and head of marketing for global tea brand Avancha.
Everyone kind of speculates on this, and I think the actual predominant thing is probably the colour. Because it's such a fantastic green colour and we all associate green with health, right? So actually that's something that's like, yes, you know, it's Instagrammable, it's colourful, it screams health. It's something that everyone wants to get their hands on. I can't speak for the exact reasons why it happened, but in my experience and what I noticed, so when I first started working in tea, matcha was available, but it was something that kind of the connoisseurs were buying, kind of having their proper Japanese kind of Zen Buddhist rituals. Or you had maybe some kind of very yellow, nasty-looking culinary grades in the health food stores that people were just throwing into their smoothies. And for me, I think there was a turning point. Google used to do a beverage and trends report where they would then signal to anyone in marketing or any of the industry like what was going to be the next big trend. But it was 2015. And at that point in time, it was things like chai, it was things like turmeric, and then matcha was on the radar as well as something that was going to take off because of the fact that it is not only, you know, vibrant and interesting and has this amazing story, but also it has functional health benefits. And that lends itself really well to innovation. You know, you can chuck it in a smoothie, you can put it in a yogurt bowl, you can drink it as a latte, you can make a cocktail out of it. I'm seeing places now that are doing matcha raves at the weekend. It's just something that I think has gone from being this very ancient traditional ritual, maybe for the Zen Buddhists in Japan and the connoisseurs, to kind of coming into this Western world and just being translated. It's like the Madonna of teas. It just kind of constantly reinvents itself.
Since last year, the shortage of this superstar product and our insatiable demand for it has been making headlines all over the world. Anna Poyan is a co-founder of the Global Japanese Tea Association, a non-profit NGO that aims to expand the Japanese tea world by building collaborations. She told me that even for those who've worked in tea in Japan for a long time, this sudden change came as a real surprise.
It was really last year when things literally exploded. I think in general it was a bit unexpected in Japan. So we could see demand was increasing, but this was very sudden. So it was unexpected, I would say. I think it was last autumn, around September, October 2024. We noticed it first because some very important tea companies from Japan that have been exporting for many years, like Marukyu Koyamaen, they started to notice this huge sudden demand, and they had to put a limit to the matcha they were selling because suddenly they didn't have enough stock. We think it's a combination of factors. Probably the most important one, the internet and social media. People started to talk about not only the health properties of matcha, but the different qualities of matcha. The best matcha quality, the spring harvest, which matcha would have the best health benefits, the fact that matcha comes from Japan, so people should source matcha from Japan and not other countries. So I think this really made a big difference.
So there's been quite a lot of media coverage about the shortage of matcha coming out of Japan. And some headlines have even said, Japan is running out of matcha. Is that a valid statement? Do you think it's overblown? Is Japan actually running out of matcha?
I don't think it's overblown. It's actually quite a serious situation in a way. So it's not that completely all the matcha has run out. So it was mainly, I think, regarding the spring harvest matcha, so the ceremonial matcha. Also because we saw in many cases that tea ceremony schools had difficulties buying the matchas they usually use for their tea practice. So when that happens, it means the situation is quite serious.
And what is the situation right now today in terms of the demand?
The situation has not improved in the sense that the demand just grew more and more. So newer matcha companies all the time being created. But at the same time, the demand is increasing, the production is not increasing that fast. There is a problem in selling matcha to everyone who wants it. So at the moment, there's not a shortage yet because we had spring harvest just in May. There's still lots of stocks of matcha, but in many cases, all the stock has been already secured to existing customers. So the production has been increasing, but it's still quite a slow increase. Just to give you an idea, if we look at the total production of Japanese tea, in 2021-2022, matcha accounted only for 5% of all Japanese tea. So quite a small percentage. And then at the end of 2024, it already grew to 7.3%. So it is all quite slow. It's not as easy as to say, okay, if there's an increase in the demand, let's produce more matcha. It requires more people, more financial investments, and it's not always that easy and quick.
In the traditional tea-growing area of Kyoto Prefecture in Japan, tea gardens cling to steep hills, with the rounded tea bushes forming an emerald green patchwork across the hillside. This is Obubu Tea Farms in the small town of Wazuka. And out inspecting this summer's leaf growth is George Gutteridge-Smith. He sent us an update on this year's spring harvest in May.
In 2025, we experienced a longer winter than usual, which allowed the tea shoots to develop more slowly in spring, which was beneficial for quality, but this resulted in a smaller harvest. This has added to the strain to the matcha supply chain this year. The summer has been extremely hot with minimal rainfall. This further affected the plant's growth, and as we approached the autumn harvest, record-breaking heat waves have put considerable stress on the gardens.
The production of matcha is meticulous and also physically demanding. First, the bushes are shaded with nets, which forces the leaves to increase chlorophyll and amino acids. Then there's harvesting, which is either done by hand plucking or machine. After that, the leaves are steamed to stop oxidation and preserve the colour. Then they're dried. These processed leaves are called tencha. The tencha is then ground into matcha in factories, which is traditionally done by stone milling, which is a very slow process. The machines can only grind about 40 grams per hour or a kilo per day. First starting as an intern, George has done many roles at Obubu, including farming and processing. And now he looks after the wholesale and retail side. So we wanted to hear how the company has been coping with the international demand.
We saw a huge spike in the demand for matcha at the very beginning of 2023, and this was something we'd never seen before. So this was an early signifier for us that things are changing a little bit. You move on to February, March of 2025, and we're concerned about the amount of stock we have, which is something that we've never had to think about so much before, because we've always been able to maintain stocks year to year for easy supply for our customers. So we started putting together some notifications for our customers that we're going to have to limit the amount of supply that we can offer. So it was really at this time that we saw the supply chain in real time from around November of 2024 starting to struggle to keep up to date with the demand that we were finding from overseas. And this is something that we're all trying to address, but it's coming at the cost of other teas. So we're going to be producing probably less teas in Japan compared to what we normally would in a year due to the demand for matcha.
For farmers, George says there's been a mixed reaction to this sudden change in their fortunes. The tea industry has been in decline. Average production area is decreasing year on year. And the average age of tea farmers in Wazuka is 65 years old, with the younger generation not willing to take over. So, how have farmers been coping with it all?
Customers are banging on their front door asking for more stock. And this is something that the farmers haven't seen before, totally unseen, where you have buyers coming and knocking on your front door asking to buy directly from you. This is a very different way of conducting business than they've been used to. While a lovely thing, it's also a little bit stressful because there's also a language barrier. Things are nice for us because our core mission is to share Japanese tea to the world. And with the world so interested in a particular type of Japanese tea, this is a really wonderful time. For a lot of other farmers who are a bit older, this sudden change in demand and want for only a specific kind of tea, when perhaps they are traditionally a tea farmer that produces more sencha, is maybe not the happiest situation there is, because they want to be producing a product that they love, but everyone's asking for something else. So they're typically, a lot of farmers are of the older generation, so this is something that's slightly stressful for the farmers at the minute. When looking to scale up a tea farm in Japan, you typically will have to make quite a long-term commitment to looking after tea gardens. And if we imagine this boom for matcha will continue for the next 10 years, then it makes sense. But we're not quite sure, will it last the next 10 years, or is this a year and a half, 2 year, boom for matcha? So it's a concern for farmers when they look at scaling up.
Like with so many things in Japan, farmers care a great deal about the preservation and the presentation of their product. Matcha has a long and fascinating history in Japan, and it has been long prized for its properties and for the craftsmanship, becoming the central element of the traditional Japanese tea ceremony, which holds deep cultural importance in Japan. It's a spiritual, aesthetic, and philosophical practice that for many reflects the core values of Japanese culture. To find out more, we spoke to Asako Stewart, a tea expert and educator based in Tokyo.
Well, tea itself arrived to Japan from China in 9th century. That ground powdered form came much later in 12th century. Powdered tea, like matcha, was expensive for the rich people or aristocrats or high-ranked warriors like samurai or shogun. So as it became far too extravagant and too showy, one Zen Buddhist monk called Murata Juko started by adopting the philosophy and the spirits of Zen Buddhism to, tea drinking and tea preparation. Murata Juko had developed the meaning and style of tea drinking into something called a chado. And that's a direct translation is the way of tea. People often call it Japanese tea ceremony, but it's not always ceremony. It's more like how you live your life through tea. It's through taking or preparing tea, you learn about how to live your life. And that's always the lifelong thing. It doesn't stop. And you learn everything from your master.
These days, it's thought only around 2 million people in Japan regularly practice the way of tea, although it's still a part of cultural education more generally.
Chado was regarded as part of one's cultural education eventually, and many people practiced it, try to get calm state of mind or learn how to behave. Well, you have to kind of figure out yourself because that's the part of the practice. Yeah, it sounds horrible, and then that's what I thought when I was young. But when you're doing it, it really is soothing, and it's all about entertaining. That's kind of art, I would say, art and philosophy all together.
Asako told us a green tea called sencha is most common in Japan, although the practice of drinking traditional loose-leaf tea in a pot has been decreasing. And it's actually ready-to-drink cold bottled tea that accounts for 60% of all tea consumption, and that is increasing year by year. But a matcha trend? Not so much.
No, I don't think there's much craze about matcha inside Japan. And matcha's always here, so it's nothing new to us. And we have used matcha for sweets or ice creams or cold drinks, hot drinks for long time. Only this year in Japan, people started noticing or people started talking about it. That, oh, did you hear that matcha is just so crazy outside Japan? And simply because of the shortage of matcha was reported in our daily news, national news, everyone's talking about it suddenly. Customers can't really buy matcha as much as you like before. It never happened before. So matcha was anyway not consumed that widely by ordination here. It's not really common thing you buy every day from the supermarket. That's more sencha, you see. So people are not that seriously worrying about it.
I visited Japan a few years ago and I took part in a traditional tea ceremony while there. And I cannot help but notice the stark contrast between what I experienced during that and the fast-paced convenience culture that matcha has become a part of here. At the beginning of the programme, we met Maren Fichter at the cafe Matcha Thing in Bath. Among the many roles she has in tea, she teaches the matcha programme at the UK Tea Academy, and she has a lot of first-hand experience of different tea traditions and practices. So I wanted to talk to her about some of the things about matcha that aren't really understood here.
There are a lot of things that are very special about many types of tea for me. I'm very interested in getting past myths and misconceptions, and matcha is sort of very rife with these things. There are a lot of misunderstandings about matcha over on this side of the world, and I'm just always very interested in asking questions that dig into the sort of what are we ignoring, what are the assumptions that we're making, and where are we maybe missing deeper questions that we could be asking. There's also, of course, the health element to it. And for me, mostly, that is more centered around the ceremonial aspect. I'm like kind of buzzing, doing things all the time, very fast moving. A lot of tea traditions require you to slow down and do things intentionally, mindfully. And so that element also really, really interested me as someone who just naturally struggles with that. So it was a challenge discovering these things, but also something that I found incredibly beneficial.
And I think a lot of the first encounter people have of matcha is seeing something on social media. What are your thoughts about the messaging that is often accompanying matcha these days?
Yeah, so while it's exciting to see, it is also something where I feel like the messaging oftentimes misses the point of what matcha is. And that element of appreciation for craftsmanship is something that's hugely important in a lot of Japanese culture. And that's something that is completely absent from the kind of social media side of matcha. But it's the side that is crucially important, I think, in the ceremonial context and to a lot of people who drink matcha daily for the appreciation of the matcha itself.
And what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about matcha in the Western world?
I think the biggest one is people are always asking for ceremonial grade matcha, and that is not really a term that exists in Japan. It's something that was kind of made up as a marketing term. It was a useful distinction in theory, right? Like, is a matcha good enough to be used in tea ceremony or is it not? If you are going to be using matcha in a tea ceremony, you're consuming it with water, just water. And using that as a quality signifier only makes sense if that's your purpose in using the matcha. If you're thinking about, I want to make a latte, or, I want an ice cream, your indicators for quality are going to be different. And so I think that this misconception that ceremonial grade is always best is not very useful.
Maren Fichter. This term ceremonial is one that I have most definitely noticed on packets of matcha, and it is often accompanied by other marketing jargon and buzzwords such as first flush and shade grown, and it is all pretty confusing. Over to tea marketing expert Sally Gertine.
There's lots of different terms like, super premium or, things like that. But the main terms I would probably think about are ceremonial. So ceremonial in the sense that it's first harvest, it's single cultivar. I think really for ceremonial, it has to have been stone milled because of the tradition of that and the making sure that it's a really fine, high quality product at the end of that process. Then you've got your daily matcha, which is something that you're going to drink with your lattes. That might be ceremonial grade, but it will be blended for flavour because actually when you put matcha into water, you're going to get a very clear flavour. So you want to use maybe single cultivar that has a very clear expression of its character. Whereas if you're going to put it into something like milk, you want it to be strong enough to shine through. And then you would have your kind of culinary grades, which is what you might chuck into your ice creams and bakes and sweets and things like that.
In the absence of any regulated production standards, you can understand why companies find it useful to use the term ceremonial. But as Sally says, because each company can apply its own rules, the label isn't a reliable indicator of quality.
In Japan, there are actually, in terms of tea, there are very few products that are regulated by like a geographical indicator or protection. One of them is gyokuro, so some of those are actually protected. Matcha is not regulated and it's not protected in any way, but perhaps this is something or somewhere where the industry needs to go. So actually, it's a free-for-all when it comes to marketing practices, really. There's a particular brand at the moment, I'm obviously not going to name names, but they talk about the fact that their product is ceremonial, they talk about the fact that it's stone-milled and the fact that it's hand-plucked and it's from Uji, and it's remarkably cheap, given that actually all of those things are kind of hallmarks or indicators of quality. But the point is that there isn't a regulatory body behind it, so you can really say what you like.
For the company you work for, what were the knock-on effects of this boom? Did you have any shortages in your supply chain?
Because we have those direct relationships, we've been quite fortunate in that we have a very, very good and strong supply. The real demand for matcha has been for matcha from Uji, which is the traditional region that produces it. People from a marketing point of view are like, oh my God, I have to have the matcha from Uji. But actually, other regions are very, very good at producing it. There's new people coming into the market that are experimenting and innovating and growing it in different ways. So we don't tend to run out of matcha in the sense that we might run out of one in particular or have a shortage for a short period of time, but we'll always have matcha because we explore different producers, different cultivars. All of the brands that supply matcha, they're about to receive their harvest, they're about to receive their first kind of batch from this year. The thing that I think will hit the headlines next is actually the price, which is going to go about 50 to 60% higher than it has been before, which I think is going to shock quite a lot of people.
Sally Gertine. I'm so fascinated by the process of shading the tea plant, the Camellia sinensis, in order to make it produce those nutritional components which are so prized. It's literally stressing the plant to make it tastier. To explain how shading affects the quality of matcha, here's George Gutteridge-Smith from Kyoto Obubu Tea Farms.
When we're looking at the quality of matcha, the highest quality harvest that we have each year is in spring. Following that is summer, and then last is autumn. The reason for this is the amount of sunlight the tea bush receives directly affects the bitterness that you'll find in the leaves. This bitterness you find in the leaves is actually antioxidants, but these antioxidants form when the sunlight hits the leaf and breaks down a compound called L-theanine. L-theanine is a wonderful, wonderful thing because it tastes delicious. Umami is the flavour profile you get from L-theanine. However, its function in a tea leaf is when sunlight hits it, it breaks down into antioxidants so it can soak up any free radicals that have been caused by damage from the sun. So as you progress through the year and your tea bush is receiving much more sunlight, then in the spring it's receiving less, so it's more umami flavour. In the summertime, it's shaded a bit less as well, so it's receiving more sunlight, so you're going to get more bitterness. And in the autumn time, they don't shade the tea bush as much at all, and it's more bitter in flavour. Typically, we use the spring harvest for ceremonial grade teas, the summer harvest for maybe a latte grade and cooking grades, and then the autumn must be for cooking. I please ask you, please don't drink autumn grade matcha. It's an experience, maybe you should try once, but it's quite bitter.
The latest chapter of Matcha's story has been its transformation into a trendy superfood. The health claims around it seem never ending. I've read that matcha increases focus and alertness. It helps with blood sugar regulation. It can reduce inflammation, that there are possible benefits for heart and liver health, and even claims around reducing cancer risk. To dig into what we actually know, I spoke to Dr. Emily Leeming, a dietitian and research scientist at King's College London.
Yeah, I think what a lot of the claims seem to broaden to look at more widely the benefits of tea and have kind of tacked that onto their matcha claims, because actually there's not that many studies done on matcha specifically. So most of the research tends to be around its effects on your attention and also how accurately you can complete a task. And this is really looking at, comparing it to caffeine alone. So matcha tends to contain not just caffeine, a little bit less than you would get from a cup of coffee, but it also contains an amino acid called L-theanine. And it's this amino acid that gives a more kind of calming effect to that caffeine buzz. It kind of calms it down and makes it kind of last a little bit longer. So the research has tended to focus around that. But actually, a lot of the research in terms of the nutrition studies, they don't actually differentiate between green tea and black tea. So actually, the largest body of evidence is just looking at tea in general. And that's where we see, associations with lower risk of heart disease. We see that, likely this benefit for blood pressure, but also cholesterol. And the reason why, with tea that is likely very much down to the fact that it contains these polyphenols that have an antioxidant action. They help to guard our cells from damage, but they also really help with your kind of vascular system. So keeping your blood vessels kind of broader and happier. And this is where we think, going back to this benefit for your attention, we have this web of blood vessels around our brain, and therefore them slightly widening, getting more oxygen, getting more nutrients, and that's likely how our attention and our focus is lasting longer.
So in the media, there's lots written about matcha being a healthier alternative to coffee, and also a lot of people sort of announcing that they're replacing their morning cup of coffee with matcha instead. Is matcha actually that much healthier than coffee?
I would just say they're very different drinks, both providing benefits, and really it's up to you for which one you feel better on and which one you prefer. Most of the body of evidence, most of the research has been done on coffee, and we see that, anything from 2 to 4 coffees a day is, has some kind of really great wide-ranging benefits from brain health to heart health. And we see this, more broadly with tea as well. But, the body of evidence around matcha is much smaller, not to say that it doesn't have a lot of key benefits. It makes complete sense that it is good for your health in terms of the fact that you are having that powder, so you're having that more concentrated source of all the kind of nutrients and the kind of bioactives that are there. But I think it's very difficult to say that it's quote unquote better. It's just providing a different set of polyphenols.
Now, talking about the marketing of matcha powders and products with matcha in, it can be quite confusing. So I've actually got a pouch of matcha in front of me. It's organic and it costs £27 for 70 servings. And I'm going to read to you what it says on the packet, the claims. Loaded with antioxidants that protect cells and protect against aging. Quenches stress and promotes calm vibes. Enhances focus and alertness. detoxifies the body due to its high chlorophyll content and boosts metabolism and energy levels. So how would you advise your average consumer reading this?
I think I always say take any marketing claims with a pinch of salt. I think any buzzword that says detoxifying in it is a massive red flag for me. So that's quite a good one to look out for if any claims include that. I would say there's no one food that is going to make or break your health. You know, if you enjoy drinking matcha, you know, go for it. But there's no food that is an absolute silver bullet. Yes, we know tea has a great benefit for your health, and matcha is kind of that more condensed version of that. But if it's coming at a price point that is not feasible, you know, maybe that's money is very likely better spent on just helping you, you know, get some more fruits and veggies in your shopping basket on a weekly basis. So there was a study out earlier this year from the US in Texas, and what they found was that they were looking at the kind of composition of different green teas and comparing that kind of cheaper, what's so-called kind of culinary matcha to the fancy, more expensive ceremonial grade matcha. So while the Japanese tea ceremony kind of matcha has got this kind of smoother kind of palate to it, because it's made with a younger leaf, it actually has more caffeine, but less polyphenols. So actually, if you're looking for that kind of polyphenol antioxidant boost, going for that slightly cheaper kind of culinary grade matcha is going to give you that extra benefit.
Emily Leeming. In the UK, the matcha market shows no signs of slowing down with the explosion of matcha as an ingredient. Here's Emma Clifford, Associate Director of the Food and Drink team at the global market research company Mintel.
Most UK retail launches featuring matcha are tea and ready-to-drink tea products. Last year, 11% of launches in these segments contained matcha, and that's up from less than 1% in 2021. That percentage has risen to 13% so far this year. There's been a lot of activity linked to matcha lattes, either ready-to-drink products or formats to make these hugely popular coffee shop drinks at home. Matcha is also gaining momentum in energy drinks as part of the natural energy trend. But it is also appearing in snacks, from popcorn to biscuits. So it is incredibly versatile. Almost any product could potentially jump on this trend to either give it a sophisticated new foodie twist or tap into its really powerful health halo. It's even crossed over into beauty and personal care. The shower gel I use even has matcha in it. The fact that matcha aligns perfectly with broader health, wellness and flavour trends means that it does have staying power. I don't see it as being just the latest flash in the pan, although there will be less potential for products to just jump on the bandwagon as time goes on. And consumers will become more switched on and discerning about matcha. So it's going to become more important for products to showcase quality and provenance, and to look to storytelling to boost engagement as well.
So, aside from the matcha shortage, what are the other points of debate in this fast-evolving matcha world? With so many companies wanting to get their hands on it and supplies still so short in Japan, there's been an uptick in production in countries like China, Vietnam and Korea. Because of the lack of any regulation, all sorts of mislabeled and even counterfeit matcha products are now being reported. For a view on this from Japan, here's Asako Stewart.
The other countries are keen to come into the game. That's fine, as long as they shade the tea and they make tencha and then make matcha. I think it's okay from anywhere in the world, as long as you are honestly making matcha. But if you are doing the kind of cheating way of buying or producing any green tea and just ground it to the powdered form and then claim it's matcha, that would be very confusing. But that's why I think the most important thing is that as a buyer, you have to be able to distinguish the real thing or not. You know, you don't want to pay a lot of money for the fake one.
And here's Anna Poyan from the Global Japanese Tea Association.
Actually, Japan is working on having a regulation about matcha, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, at least on the global market. So at the end of the day, it's up to the tea companies, the tea sellers, to be more transparent on where they source the teas, on the area of production, the season of harvest, and so on.
So it seems a lot of the chains claim that they're using ceremonial grade matcha in their drinks, but so many of the drinks that they're selling are mixed with milk in lattes, for example, or syrups. I mean, is it necessary for them to be using ceremonial grade, and could they actually switch to the culinary grade? And would this be a useful move actually for the industry?
Yes, I think it would be useful. Actually, I think it's great. Many coffee places, many companies are putting more attention on the high quality matcha. But it's a bit of a waste maybe to mix such a precious tea with milk, with many cases sweeteners, sugar, syrups. High-grade matcha is a product that involves a lot of effort to reach a very subtle and complex flavor profile. So if we mix it with something else, this delicate profile is basically ruined and we cannot appreciate it at its best.
So where does this story go next? A final word from George Guttridge-Smith from the tea gardens of Kyoto, Japan.
What we're hoping is that matcha is a format. So the format is a tea powder. There are other tea powders available which are also very delicious. So there's also hojicha powder, which is a type of roasted green tea, and genmaicha powder. Genmaicha is a green tea combined with toasted rice and is a very delicious tea in its own right. And from there, it's a more easy jump to their loose leaf counterparts. And so if we can increase the amount of enjoyment for loose leaf tea, hopefully the decline in loose leaf tea consumption that we've been seeing year on year will start to turn around. And this is a big domestic problem we have in Japan. So hopefully with the popularity overseas, this will help reinvigorate the domestic tea consumption. It's such a wonderful product. And if everyone can sit down and enjoy a delicious cup of tea together, then, that's not a bad thing.